Neo-Platonism is the culmination of centuries of spiritual and philosophical development, beginning with a philosophical tradition established by Plato in the 5th and 4th centuries BC. Plato was a philosopher born in the Greek city-state of Athens, somewhere around 420 BC, in what is now known as the Greek classical period. Plato was born to a wealthy and affluent family with roots tracing back to the very foundation of Athenian democracy. As a youth, Plato spent his days in leisure, composing poems dedicated to the god Dionysus, that is until a chance meeting with his soon-to-be mentor, Socrates, upon which he abandoned poetry completely in favour of philosophy. During his long life, Plato was responsible for composing a large corpus of works concerning a wide range of topics from metaphysics and ethics to epistemology and politics. Plato would convey his theories and arguments through the characters in his work, usually staking two or more people against each other who held opposing views. Through the resulting debate, the truth of the matter at hand would be reached. This way of touching at the heart of matters came to be known as the dialectic method. Works composed by Plato, such as the Timaeus, famous for its mythical story of Atlantis, would be fundamental to the development of Western philosophy and religion. When Plato died in 348 BC, his beliefs and philosophy did not die with him. The Academy, established by Plato in 387 BC, is considered by scholars today to be the first institution for higher education in the Western world. At the Academy, students would learn subjects such as biology, astronomy, mathematics, music, politics, and more. Over the centuries, Platonism would undergo significant developments, adopting concepts from other competing philosophical traditions such as Aristotelianism and Stoicism in a period of time scholars now call the Middle Platonic period, which stretched from around 90 BC until the late 3rd century AD. After the end of the Middle Platonic era, Platonism would evolve once more into what scholars call Late Platonism or Neo-Platonism. This period of intellectual development saw the Platonists incorporating mysticism and esoteric rites into their philosophy, championed by geniuses such as Plotinus, Iamblichus, Porphyry, and Proclus. Before we go any further, it is important to establish what the Platonic One is. The One is first conceived in Plato's work Parmenides, where it is described not as a god in the traditional sense, but rather as a principle, first cause, and source of all creation. The first hypostasis is called the Ineffable One, which the 5th century Platonist and head of the Academy, Proclus Lycaeus, described as totally beyond being, absolutely simple, and beyond all knowledge. The second hypostasis is the Simply One. This is the One in activity, functioning as the active and eternal source of all creation. The third and final hypostasis is the Henads or Many Ones. They occur from the Simply One multiplying itself to create many perfect copies, each differentiating one another and in the process bringing multiplicity into existence. Together the Henads created Ion, the first demiurgic creator god and the personification of eternity. Ion appears in a number of classical religions, including the Hermetic text, Gnosticism, Mithraism, and the Chaldean oracles. Ion creates the first order of gods and the Empyrean realm, also referred to by the Platonists as the intelligible or spiritual realm. There are 3 realms or orders of existence, each composed of 3 sub-realms. Ion resides at the very peak of the Empyrean realm with the other intelligible gods. Together, their divine energies flow outward, in the process creating other lesser gods and realms. At the base of the Empyrean realm lives the second demiurge, which the Platonists identified as Zeus. However, this Zeus is very different to the one we all know from Greek mythology. The Platonic Zeus was seen as a truly benevolent god who created our world purely out of love. Attributes such as benevolence and goodness were believed by the Platonists to be inherent to all the gods. In fact, Iamblichus makes it clear that the gods are incapable of evil. This stands in stark contrast to the Gnostics, a collection of loosely affiliated cults prevalent around the same time as Neoplatonism that believed the creator of the cosmos was a demon named Yaldabaoth who had trapped mortal souls within his realm. Zeus, as the chief designer of our world, used the forms and ideas that descend to him from the higher intelligible gods as a blueprint when creating the cosmos. I intend on creating a whole video explaining the forms, but for now, just think of them as the very concepts and principles that make up our existence. Concepts such as numbers, beauty, and justice are all examples of forms. Before the formation of the physical world, Zeus created the world soul to contain it. This layer of reality is called the psychic realm by the Platonists, and it is the origin of all souls. The creation of the world soul's body is described in the Timaeus. Plato goes into great detail on the creation of the cosmos, the physical manifestation of the world soul. He describes the world soul as being made in the image of Ion, having the form of the Greek letter chi, and holding within itself the powers of sameness and difference. Individual souls are then created out of the world soul. Some souls were created for the cosmic gods, others for the daemonic orders, and finally souls for the living beings that would soon incarnate on Earth. The third and final realm is our Earth, which the Platonists called the sublunar realm. This is where souls who have descended from the heavens for one reason or another end up incarnating. The Neo-Platonists held to a doctrine of reincarnation, believing that after death most souls would descend to the underworld for purification before returning to Earth in a new body. Plato describes in the myth of that this journey to the underworld is what is responsible for ego death, and after drinking from the river Lethe, the soul is effectively wiped of all memory of its earthly life in preparation for its next incarnation. To avoid this death of personality, the Platonists believed one had to embrace a life of ethics and philosophy, all in preparation for engagement in the theurgic craft, the ultimate source of salvation. Theurgy is best described as religious magic, and was closely tied to the temples and mystery rites of the classical world. Many of the Platonists had been initiated into multiple mysteries over the course of their lives. A tradition dating back far before Plato, with pre-Socratic philosophers such as Empedocles and Pythagoras being early examples of philosophers initiated into the mysteries. By the late antique period, the mystical traditions of the Greeks, Egyptians, and Chaldeans had all been incorporated into a single cohesive system, supported by a strong philosophical foundation. The goal of theurgy was to achieve union first with the gods, then ultimately with the One. To do this, the theurgists would use astrology, sacred symbols, and secret names to invoke the god's presence. The two most well documented practices of theurgy are the telistic rites and the binding and loosing ritual. Telistike was the rite of statue ensoulment. By consecrating a statue of a god with the correct tokens and symbols, the statue would be transformed into an agama, a living statue hosting the soul of a god. The Chaldean oracles written in the late 3rd century provides a detailed account on how to dedicate a statue to the goddess Hecate. The second theurgic method was known as the binding and loosing ritual, and involved the theurgist becoming possessed by the god invoked. Once possessed, the theurgist's consciousness would rise up to the abode of the gods, temporarily participating in divine life. While the theurgist witnessed the divine, the god would control their body and utter oracles revealing the truth of reality. Through continual communion with the gods would enhance their receptivity to divine energies, eventually reaching the point where they could be fully possessed by their personal guardian daimon. It is said by the Platonists that every soul has their own guardian daimon, assigned to them when they were first sown into the orbit of their leader god. The primary function of the guardian daimon is to oversee the fate of a mortal, guiding them toward the gods and the good. However, humans have a choice as to whether or not to obey their daimon. The second function of the guardian daimon, and most important to the Neoplatonists, was assimilation with the daimon. By living the life assigned to us and practicing theurgy, humans could become effectively possessed by their daimon. When this happens, the mortal soul is uplifted to the realm of the gods, gaining true knowledge or gnosis, while at the same time achieving immortality of the self. The guardian daimon is also referred to as the higher self in some sources, with Plotinus, a close predecessor of Iamblichus, claiming the mortal soul and the guardian daimon are in fact two halves of a whole, rather than separate beings. Theurgy was the only way to assimilate the daimonic self and descend to the gods, eventually achieving the ultimate goal of union with the One. Neo-Platonism provides a coherent paradigm for understanding the world around us, universal ethics, and salvation of the soul, all backed by centuries of intellectual development by some of the greatest minds to have ever been born. With the rise of Christianity in the 300s and the banning of traditional polytheistic religion, the influence of Neoplatonic philosophy began to wane. There was a short resurgence under the Emperor Julian, given the epithet the Apostate for his conversion to polytheism at a young age. Emperor Julian, born 331 AD, wrote many works dedicated to the gods and attempted to establish an imperial religion centered around the sun god Helios. However, his life was cut short while campaigning in the east against the Sassanid Empire. After his death, the Neoplatonic schools continued for a couple more centuries, despite continual persecution. In the year 529 AD, Emperor Justinian issued a legislation prohibiting the teaching of non-Christian philosophy, and with that the Platonic Academy, established almost 1,000 years before, came to an abrupt end. If you would like to learn more about Neoplatonism, I have multiple articles on my Substack where I dive into topics such as theurgy, ontology, and the personal daimon, all available for free. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more videos on ancient philosophy, religion, and history.